So, I plan to speak for a while, but I would like to save some time in order to discuss and to answer questions if you have, or to listen to your remarks. So I will follow my PowerPoint presentation, which is based, as you can see, on the Arab Spring and the use of the information technologies during the Arab Spring. And the title says, an internet dystopia. Dystopia is a word for anti-utopia. I mean, the meaning is quite clear, and maybe the two pictures we have on the screen may explain what I want to say in English, or what I'm trying to explain in English, that during a span of time, which is about 3, 4, 5 years maybe, at least for, I would say, the common people, the lay people somehow, in that very short span of time, we have passed from a very positive approach, the Arab Spring being a kind of utopia, being a kind of illustration of kind of a miracle, and now the information technologies being a kind of inferno, being a kind of winter, being a kind of very pessimist and very negative tool according to the political process. I say that the two pictures show this in a way or in another. On the top, you have a picture which has been taken, I think, in Egypt somehow in 2011, where somebody is handing a kind of poster with every digital tool available. I mean, internet, Google, Yahoo, and Twitter, and so on. Facebook is not there, but it was there, of course. And the second picture, maybe a few of them recognize it. It's a picture taken from the Daesh propaganda, from the Daesh use of the internet tools, and of course, everything we can see which is connected to Daesh reminds us of the dangers and the very negative use of these tools, which were not so long ago so much praised. So how did this happen? How did we pass from the heaven to the inferno? I think that we had a story. We had a real story during the Arab Spring. We had a story which was based on the invention of the young rebellious Arab. You have there two covers from the Time magazine. One is at the end of year 2011, where the protester was the person of the year. And the protester was, of course, the Wall Street people, was, of course, the Los Indignados, but he was also, and maybe before, the Arab Youth, who has been fighting in the streets of the Arab world or the Arab capitals during year 2011. And this picture of the young rebellious Arab was rather new, and everybody was joining in the car, saying that in fact we had a new generation. This is the second picture. We had a new generation changing the world, changing the idea we had of the Arab world and the Arab youth. In order to have this picture, in order for this picture to work, you need to have a context. You need to prepare the ground for such a picture to emerge in the media discourse. And one of the way, or one of the explanations for the apparition of this new picture of the Arab youth was the invention too of, or was, it's not an invention, it was the turn that the American diplomacy had taken some years before the Arab Spring, at the end of Bush government, and at the with first and second Obama's presidency. At the right of the picture, yeah, it's right for you too. At the right of the picture, you have somebody that you may not know, who is called Jared Cohen. Jared Cohen is a very good example of the people who have made this 20th century statecraft doctrine. a doctrine which aimed was to, I have to look, to fully leverage the networks, technologies, and demographics of our interconnected world. Jared Cohen, when he was a Frenchman, visited a lot of Arab countries. He went to Syria, he went to Iraq, he went to Iran, he went to Egypt, and he met at that time the young Arab people who were going to appear a few years later in Cairo or in Tunis or in other places in the Arab world. But Jared Cohen is also somebody who has been working with Google. And the guy who is at the right of Jared Cohen is Mr. Eric Schmidt, who is the CEO of Google company, Google Incorporate. And those two people illustrate exactly the kind of the kind of cooperation, if I can say so, between the big internet firms like Facebook, like Google, like so many other companies like that, and the State Department in the States. And those two people wrote a book which was called The New Digital Age, which was not very successful, in fact, but it was a kind of, it was planned to be published in 2011, and it was a bit too late when it was published, in fact. But it was the idea of explaining how the internet or the social networks or the social media could change the world and could change the politics of the world. And they were not the only people who were explaining things like that. Before, I mean, the State Department embraced a new turn in its diplomacy. You had quite a lot of social scientists in the in the States, especially in the States, who were advocating the use of the digital technologies in order to liberate the world. People like Ethan Zuckerman, like Leigh Sharkey, Philip Howard, and so many others developed what we may call, I mean, the cyber optimist explanation of the world. What do I mean by a cyber optimist explanation of the world? Maybe the simplest way to explain this is to trace back the story to year 93, when somebody called Christopher Kedzie, who was working for the RAND Corporation in the States, phrased what he called at that time the Dictator Dilemma. What is the Dictator Dilemma? Christopher Kedzie and many others were thinking that the use or the development of the digital tools and all the new information technologies were going to change the world and were going to change the way we do politics. For the dictators, they were placed in front of a dilemma, meaning that either they open themselves to those technologies, either they were going to close the country and to die. If they close their country and it means that they were going to die, because economics today means that you use digital technologies, information technologies. So a country which is closed, like Northern Korea, for instance, cannot survive. So dictatorships were going to fall anyhow if they were cutting themselves from the progress, from the digital, from the digitalization of the world. But on the other hand, if a dictator was to open his society to the use of the new technologies, to the use of the digital media, and to the use of the social network, the dictatorship was going to fall down again, because the coming of information, the coming of news, the coming of new connections between the people, the making of networks between the people and so on, was going to impulse a process of democratization which was going to put an end to any dictatorship. This was more or less the theory, and the revolution had to be digitized And for many people, what we have seen at the beginning of the Arab Spring was exactly the illustration of that. Nobody was thinking that Ben Ali was going to fall someday. Nobody was thinking that Hosni Mubarak was not going to have his son in power after him. And all of a sudden, we could see those two governments falling in pieces, and many other in the Arab world being in trouble. Starting with Morocco and going all the east to Bahrain and to Kuwait and so on. So everybody was very optimistic about this situation, and everybody was thinking that the revolution will come thanks to the information technology. But for a story to work, you need to have characters. You need to have people. You need to have heroes. It's like a good movie, you know. You need to have a good story, but you need to have good actors too. And so all of a sudden, during the first months of year 2011, we could see a lot of new faces which pop up from nowhere. And one of the best examples of these new faces, which were absolutely unknown from the political arena, was the face of Wael Ghonim. Wael Ghonim, again, it's a strange masira, it's a strange way, it's a strange story, let's say like that. Wael Ghonim was in charge of the selling department of Google in the Middle East. It had nothing to do with politics. He was a citizen, of course. He was close to the Muslim Brotherhood at some time, but then he became closer to Mr. Baradei, and then he became one of the stars of this Arab Spring of year 2011, when he was put in jail, then released, and then he became one of the most famous people speaking on Tahrir Square, and then he went to the United States, and he started negotiating with the International Fund, Monetary Fund, and so on. He became a kind of minister at that time, without having any official position. And Wael Ghonim was just one of those many young people who were the new faces, who were the illustration of the embodification, you can say that in English, or who were incarning. Incarné? I guess you can say that. Incarné, we were illustrating at least this digital miracle, this incredible revolution made possible thanks to the information technologies. Well, this was just the beginning of the story. This happened during quite a short span of time, in fact. This happened at the end of year 2010, when in Tunisia we had the first demonstrations against Mohammed Ben Ali. And then I would say that starting from April or May, or at least starting from June 2011, maybe some people started to have second thoughts about this the use of the digital media. One of the very good examples of this change in the way we were looking at those things was what was this gay girl in Damascus story. I was at that time living in Damascus, so the story is quite close to me and quite important to me too on a personal level. But at that time, I mean, the uprising of the revolution, if we can call it like that, in Syria had started, and the social media were used, of course, in Syria. And among the people who were fighting against the Syrian regime at that time, there was a girl which was called Amina Arraf, who was quite famous in the world web. She was making a buzz, as we say, and she had a lot of fans, a lot of people reading her blog, and suddenly in May she disappeared. She was writing from Damascus. She was describing the revolution, and at a time she disappeared. A few days or even 1 week, 2 weeks later on, somebody came back on the blog saying that, well, I'm sorry, I'm in fact connecting somehow to Amina, and I'm afraid that she has been caught by the henchmen, Bashar al-Assad henchmen, and I'm afraid that she is now tortured, and maybe she has been killed in the Syrian jails. But in fact, some people in the States and in Great Britain made inquiries about this story. Some people suspected there was something bizarre about that story. And they discovered that there was no Amina Arraf. She never existed. In fact, Amina Arraf was a guy. And the guy was not gay. The guy was not a so young lady. He was somebody in his late 30s. He was living in Edinburgh. And he was somehow connected to the CIA. Not very clear, but he was traveling to Turkey and meeting people from the Syrian revolution. So somebody whose life was not so obvious. So this was a sign for a lot of people that the social media, the social making of the revolution, I mean the digital making of the revolution could not be trusted in such a naive way, that we had to think about this very optimist reading of the digital technologies, and we had to try to understand it better. Then it was a time, maybe starting from 2012, the time for delusions. In fact, the time for delusions had begun before. The Net Delusion is a title of a book written by Evgeny Morozov, who is an Ukrainian, I think, or maybe not an Ukrainian, somebody coming from the east of Europe, who wrote a book in late 2010 about the risk of trusting too much the digital tools as a way of changing politics and a way to making a democracy. And we had many examples during year 2012, 2013 of those delusions that internet could bring with it, like the delusion we had with the gay girl in Damascus. One of the most famous, maybe, stories, once again, about the delusion of the use of the digital tools was the Tamarrud movement in Egypt. Maybe you remember that story. President Sisi came into power in July of 2013 by what I'm obliged to call a coup d'etat, after huge demonstrations in Cairo, once again, during June of the same year, a few days before. And those demonstrations have been called by a group of people who was called Tamarrud Rebellion, and they were using a lot the digital media, the social media, the social networks, in order to make the people going down to the streets and demonstrate against President Morsi and helping somehow paving the path for the coming of a military regime at the head of which we have now President Sisi, Marshal Sisi. And once again, a few weeks or months later, it became obvious that Tamarrud and all the work he had done on the web was not exactly what we thought it was. It was something which was directed, which was financed, which was helped by many hands, Egyptian sometimes, and foreign hands also. So this was another example of the bad use, if I may say so, of the digital information technologies. One of the reasons such a use could or had become possible is paradoxically the success of the web. In fact, before the what we call the Arab Spring, on the web you had only one partner. On the web, you had only one point of view, if I may say so. The official bodies in the Arab world were not using the social networks, were not using the net, were not speaking to the citizens using the information technologies, or at least the one which are connected with the internet. But as soon as we had those events in January and February 2011, everybody, every political party, every political force, from the left to the right, from the progressive to the conservative, started using the internet and the social networks, and as a result of this, it became more and more difficult for the Arab citizen, for the user of the social networks in the Arab world, to find his way in this kind of chaos which had become the Arab internet. Because all of a sudden, in the span of a few weeks or a few months, you had so many voices, so many people, so many blogs, so many newspapers, so many Facebook pages which popped up, and it was quite impossible to understand where was the truth, who was speaking to whom, which kind of language was taken on the web, and who you could trust on the web. With a very few exceptions, like Nuat, for instance, in Tunisia, where Nuat had begun long before the revolution, so it had a kind of organization which made him trustful for the Tunisian users of the internet, but it was a kind of exception. In most countries, you had a real chaos, and the people who were using the web as a kind of light in order to find a counter-discourse, in order to find the truth against the propaganda of the regime, or the various regimes, those same people were absolutely lost in the social media, not knowing how to find what they were looking for, and having also quite a lot of doubts about the things which were told to them on the social media. And last but not least, with the changing situation in the Arab world, the information technologies became something which I can call a weapon. For this, I will start. I will try take as an example the situation in Syria, where you have such a level of violence, of civil war, that the use of the social networks and social media in this context leads to murder, leads to death on both sides. You cannot say that some people are better than the other. In fact, in such a situation, everybody uses the net as a weapon, not in order to construct a democracy, not in order to construct a kind of public agora where you can exchange ideas, when you can listen to the other in order to build the future, but on the contrary, where the net, where the social networks is a place where you can kill somebody, putting him on that place. So the Syrian regime did that with something which is called Syrian Electronic Army. Al-Jaysh al-Suri al-Electroni, it's an army, it's a weapon. It's obvious for the Syrian regime that the fight is also on the social media, and that the war is also on the web. But on the other side, you have something which is called in Arabic Qaimat al-Ar, which is la liste de honte, the shame, list of shameless, or something like that, list of shame. I don't know how to translate it. Somebody can help me for that. Where some people who were suspected to be pro Bashar al-Assad regime or something like that were publicly denounced But at that time, or when you are living in Syria, such a denunciation means that everybody can kill you, and it obviously happened. So we had what we can call the deadly web. I mean, instead of this very optimist picture that we had at the beginning of the Arab Intifada, the Arab Surge, we had something very, very negative. Maybe I should try to summarize these few ideas, underlining a few things which seem to me of some importance. The first, and it's quite important, even if I didn't say that before, I was supposed to say that in my introduction, but I'm going to say it in my conclusion, the same thing more or less. We had a change. We had a change in the look or in the image we have of the Arab world. Before what we call the Arab Spring, nobody had any idea about the use of the social networks, of the social media in this part of the world. And thanks to those events, at least, people did understand that something is going on that scene, that those countries too are passing in a process or are acting in a process of globalization and digitalization, which make things quite different of what they were before. And such a change in the picture we have of the Arab world is very important, I think. The Arab world is not only a people where you have beard people, where you have camels, and where you have souks and this kind of, fancy exotic things. It's a place where you have people using digital tools, and that's something which is very, very positive. One of the few positive things we may say for the last years we have seen. The second thing is that the Arab world has been a kind of field work for the various theories about the impact of the digital tools in on the political societies. And there again, in a very short span of time, we had a radical change in the way we were looking at things. A few years ago, it was quite impossible for people like Evgeny Morozov to develop, I would say, a critique of the Internet as a tool for democracy. When I quoted people like Howard, Shirky, and Zuckerman, you have to remember that those people were quoted or were designed or were nominated as the major thinkers of the last years. I mean, you have in the Arab media this kind of, in the American media this kind of palmarès of the best scientists of the year, and all the cyber optimists were always quoted in those palmarès, saying that they are the people who are seeing the future, They are the people who are explaining what we are going to see in the coming years. And yes, the future is going to be bright, and it will be just perfect thanks to the new tools we have. Just a few years later, partly because of the situation in the Arab world, and partly also because of the whole process we have seen with WikiLeaks and these kind of things, the story has changed, and I would say a more balanced view of the things is actually dominating, and I think I don't know if the truth is on one side or the other, but at least. I think it's certainly very important to have a challenging view and not to follow only this kind of very naive and optimist view of the things we have. But I still think that there is something missing in the picture. We still look at the impact of the digital tools in somehow too restricted way. We should not, when we speak about the digital tools and politics, we always think in an old-fashioned way. We always think with the tools we have according to the historical experience we have from the 19th or the 20th century. So we are trying to understand how the political discourse or the political communication could improve, how the political debate could improve in a society and so on. But we always focus on what we call the political scene. As I wrote there, we are focusing on the impact of the internet on the political arena, trying to see what difference it makes to have these new tools on the political game we know. But instead of that, I think we should, and I try to do that in that book, that's why you can see the cover, we should maybe look differently at the things and try to understand what I call the political outputs of the use of the digital media. I'm sure, and I'm not the only one to say that, obviously, I'm sure that the digital media, the social networks, the social media are not going to change politics. Politics are going to be politics, and the balance of power is going to stay the balance of power. Nothing is going to change. Nobody and nothing is able to change what is politics. Politics is a balance between forces who are fighting for power and for the limitation of power. But I really think that the digital media and that the digitalization of the world is going the way we think about politics, is going to change the way we think about authority. And this is maybe the real impact of the social media and the social networks. We are no more going to do politics as we did before. Of course, it's quite difficult to distinguish, to see the seeds of this new politics, but especially here in Spain, you may feel a bit what I want to say. We had a little chat a few minutes ago with somebody who was no more there, I don't know, here, and I was telling to him, okay, who was going to say in Spain, at least 4 or 5 years ago that Podemos and Ciudadanos were going to be so important on the political arena? I'm not going to say that those two parties are going to change the politics of Spain. I'm not going to say that they are going to take power or whatever. But certainly the way we think of politics in Spain has nothing to do today with what we had 4 or 5 years ago, because of those parties, which are different parties, whatever we think of them, which are different parties because they have taken some of the outputs of these digital technologies. They are framed, they are modelized, they are informés, we say in French. They are the word for that. Sorry? Informé? No, not informed, but in the vocabulary of the computer sciences. Informatized. They are digitalized somehow, and the way they act on politics is a consequence, I think, of this digitalization of the politics. So much more important that the fact that a political party appears in Egypt, or that a political leader appears thanks to the social media or whatever. I think that the way the Arab citizens react with what I call authority, which can be political authority, but which can be also social authority, sexual authority, parental authority, all things which are transformed by the use of the internet. All of this will have, I'm sure of this, will have repercussions, will have an impact on the way people are going to deal with politics. Which way this is going to take, frankly, I have no idea. By the present, I am quite pessimist about the situation of the Arab world, like everybody, I think. But nobody knows. Frankly, what we have seen before was quite unexpected. And I do expect myself that we are going to see very unexpected things also in the coming years. That's one of the few things which help me to stay or to remain a bit optimist according to the future in that part of the world. So for me, it would be more or less what I have to say. Of course, the floor is open to your remarks and contradictions, and in French, in English, in español, lo que quieren, también in arábigo si quieren.
Thank you very much.